In the heart of the fog-shrouded city of Stanlow, where cobblestone streets whispered the secrets of the past, the presence of ghosts was an accepted reality. The citizens went about their lives amid the spectral echoes of history, unperturbed by the occasional brush of a cold, invisible hand or the distant sound of disembodied footsteps. Ghosts were as much a part of Stanlow as its ancient clock tower or the labyrinth and alleys that twisted through the city like the veins of an old, gnarled tree. Among these spectral inhabitants, the most notorious was the ghost of Rahan Blacktree, the founder of the formidable engineering castle. The castle, a vast and imposing structure of iron and stone, loomed over the city like a silent sentinel, its turrets piercing the sky. By day, it was a place of scholarly pursuits and mechanical marvels, where inventors and engineers from across the land gathered to push the boundaries of knowledge. By night, however, the atmosphere changed. The air grew heavier, and an oppressive silence fell over the castle, broken only by the echoes of Rahan Blacktree's restless spirit. Rahan Blacktree had been a visionary, a man whose brilliance was matched only by his paranoia. He had transformed Stanlow into a hub of innovation, but his rise to power was marred by suspicion and fear. He trusted no one, convinced that assassins lurked around every corner, plotting his demise. His fears were not unfounded. On a stormy night, as thunder shook the foundations of the castle and lightning tore the sky asunder, Rahan was found dead, his body crumpled at the foot of his grand design, the astral clock. The circumstances of his death were mysterious, and whispers of treachery spread like wildfire through the city. In death, Rahan's spirit could not rest. Clad in the same black cloak he had worn in life, he wandered the dimly lit corridors of the engineering castle, his eyes burning with an unearthly glow, ever in search of the assassins who had ended his life. His presence was both a curse and a deterrent. Those who ventured into the castle after dark spoke of a palpable fear, of shadows that moved with a life of their own, and of a voice that echoed through the halls, whispering of betrayal and vengeance. One such night, a group of young engineers, emboldened by curiosity and perhaps a bit too much ale, decided to test the legend. Among them was Amelia Thorne, a brilliant mind with a fierce determination to prove her worth in the male-dominated world of engineering. She had heard the tales of Rahan's ghost but dismissed them as mere superstition. To her, the castle was a treasure trove of knowledge waiting to be uncovered, and she was determined to explore its hidden depths. As the clock struck midnight, Amelia and her companions gathered at the entrance to the engineering castle. The moon cast a pale light over the cobblestones, and the air was thick with anticipation. With a mixture of bravado and apprehension, they pushed open the heavy iron doors and stepped into the dimly lit foyer. The castle's interior was a maze of corridors and staircases, each turn more disorienting than the last. The flickering light of their lanterns cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the silence was punctuated only by the creak of the floorboards beneath their feet. They made their way to the heart of the castle, where the astral clock stood in all its intricate glory. Amelia was mesmerized by the sheer complexity of the mechanism, her fingers tracing the delicate gears and cogs that made up the clock's inner workings. It was then that she felt a cold, tingling sensation that started at the nape of her neck and spread down her spine. She turned, her breath catching in her throat, and saw him. Rahan Blacktree stood at the edge of the room, his spectral form shimmering in the dim light. His eyes, burning with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the veil of death, locked onto hers. The room grew colder, and the air seemed to vibrate with a low, humming energy. Amelia's companions froze, their faces pale with terror, but she felt a strange compulsion to step forward, as if drawn by an invisible force. "You?" Rahan's voice was a whisper, yet it filled the room, echoing off the walls. "You seek the truth." Amelia nodded, her voice caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to ask the questions that burned in her mind, but the words eluded her. Rahan drifted closer, his form becoming more defined with each step. He reached out, his hand passing through the mechanisms of the astral clock as if they were mere illusions. "They betrayed me," he said, his voice filled with a sorrow that seemed to reverberate through the very stones of the castle. "Find them, avenge me." Before Amelia could respond, a deafening crash echoed through the room, and the ground beneath them shook. The lanterns flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in, and her companions scrambled for the exit, their footsteps echoing through the corridors. Amelia, however, remained rooted to the spot, her eyes locked onto Rehan's. The ghostly figure began to fade, his form dissolving into the shadows. "Find them," he repeated, his voice now a distant whisper. "The truth lies buried." And then he was gone, leaving Amelia alone in the darkened room, her mind racing with questions and a newfound determination. She knew that the answers she sought lay within the castle's hidden depths, and that the ghost of Rehan Blacktree would not rest until the mystery of his death was uncovered. As she turned to leave, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if the assassins were still among them, their treachery woven into the very fabric of Stanlow? With a final glance at the astral clock, Amelia made her way back through the labyrinthine corridors, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The ghost of Rehan Blacktree had given her a mission, and she would not rest until she had uncovered the truth. But as she stepped out into the fog-shrouded streets of Stanlow, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the shadows themselves were alive with the secrets of the past. Little did she know, the true horror was only just beginning. The cold air of Stanlow bit into Amelia's skin as she exited the engineering castle, the city cloaked in an eerie silence that seemed to pulse with the ghost's parting words. Her companions had scattered in terror, but Amelia was left with a burden heavier than she could have ever imagined. The shadowy streets twisted and turned as she made her way back to her small apartment, her mind racing with the implications of Rehan's message. The next morning, the city was abuzz with the usual hum of activity, but Amelia felt a distinct disconnect. The daily routines of the townsfolk felt surreal in contrast to the chilling encounter she'd had. As she navigated through the bustling marketplace, she kept replaying Rehan's words in her mind. She needed to find out who had betrayed him and why his death had been shrouded in such mystery. Amelia's first stop was the library, an ancient building nestled between modern shops, its exterior a testament to the rich history of Stanlow. The librarian, an elderly woman with glasses perched precariously on her nose, greeted her with a warm smile. "Back so soon, Amelia. What is it you seek today?" "Information," Amelia replied, her voice steady. "About Rehan Blacktree and the events leading up to his death." The librarian's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of concern flickering across her features. "Rehan Blacktree. His story is not one for the faint of heart. Are you sure you want to delve into such matters?" Amelia nodded, her resolve unshaken. "I need to know the truth." With a sigh, the librarian led her to a secluded corner of the library, where ancient tomes and dusty scrolls awaited. She handed Amelia a thick, leather-bound book with the title The Chronicles of Stanlow etched in faded gold lettering. "Start here," the librarian advised, "but be cautious. Some secrets are buried for a reason." Amelia spent hours poring over the text, absorbing every detail of Rehan Blacktree's life and his contributions to the city. It was clear that he had been a genius, but also a man plagued by paranoia and fear. The chapters describing his final days were particularly haunting, filled with accounts of strange occurrences and whispered rumors of treachery. As she turned the final page, a loose piece of parchment slipped out. It was a letter, written in a hurried, scrawling hand. The ink was smudged, but she could make out enough to piece together its contents. "My dearest Rehan, they are closing in. Trust no one. The astral clock holds the key. If you are reading this, it means I have failed. Forgive me. Yours eternally, L." The letter sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. Who was L? And what did they mean by the astral clock holds the key? She knew she had to return to the castle to investigate further, but the thought of facing Rehan's ghost again filled her with dread. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amelia found herself once more at the entrance to the engineering castle. The air was thick with tension, the shadows deepening as she pushed open the heavy iron doors. This time, she was alone. Her footsteps echoed through the empty halls as she made her way to the heart of the castle. The astral clock stood silent and imposing, its gears and cogs interlocked in a delicate dance of precision. Amelia circled the mechanism, searching for any clue that might explain the cryptic message in the letter. She felt along the edges of the clock, her fingers brushing against the cold metal until she found a small, almost imperceptible latch. With a click, a hidden compartment popped open, revealing a tarnished brass key and a folded piece of parchment. Her heart pounded as she unfolded the paper, revealing a map of the castle with a series of cryptic symbols and markings. At the bottom of the map, a single word was scrawled: Sanctuary. Amelia's mind raced. She knew the castle well, but she had never heard of a place called Sanctuary. The map seemed to indicate a hidden passage somewhere within the castle walls. Determined to uncover the truth, she set off to follow the map's instructions. The passage led her through winding corridors and narrow staircases she had never explored before. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in around her as she descended deeper into the castle's bowels. Finally, she reached a heavy wooden door, its surface covered in strange, arcane symbols. Taking a deep breath, Amelia inserted the brass key into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit chamber filled with shelves of ancient books and scrolls. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested a large, leather-bound tome. The cover was adorned with intricate designs and a single word, Sanctuary. As Amelia approached the pedestal, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. A faint whisper filled the air, and she felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she saw Rehan Blacktree's ghost, his form more solid than before, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and desperation. "You found it," he said, his voice a cold whisper. "But the truth is more dangerous than you can imagine." Amelia took a step back, her heart racing. "What is this place? What happened to you?" Rehan's ghost drifted closer, his expression a mask of sorrow. "This is the Sanctuary, a place where the darkest secrets of Stanlow are kept hidden. My death was not a simple assassination. It was part of a larger conspiracy, one that threatens the very foundation of this city." Before Amelia could respond, the room began to tremble. The shelves rattled, and books tumbled to the floor. A low, ominous hum filled the air, and the symbols on the door began to glow with a sinister light. "You must leave," Rehan urged, his voice growing more urgent. "They know you're here. The conspirators. They will stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried." Amelia turned to flee, but the door slammed shut with a deafening crash. The room was plunged into darkness, save for the eerie glow of the symbols. She felt a cold hand grasp her arm, and Rehan's voice echoed in her mind. "Find them! Avenge me!" With a surge of determination, Amelia wrenched her arm free and ran towards the door, her mind racing with the implications of what she had discovered. The conspirators were still at large, and they would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. But she knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies, people she could trust. As she burst out of the castle and into the fog-shrouded streets of Stanlow, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, and the air was thick with a sense of impending danger. But despite the fear that gnawed at her, Amelia knew one thing for certain: she would not rest until she had uncovered the truth and brought Rehan's killers to justice. Little did she know, the true horror was only just beginning, and the conspirators were closer than she ever imagined, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Amelia's discovery set her on a perilous path. She moved through the fog-shrouded streets of Stanlow with a sense of urgency, the map clutched tightly in her hand. She had to find allies, people she could trust to help her unravel the conspiracy that had cost Rehan Blacktree his life and now threatened hers. She first sought out Thomas Harding, a respected engineer and an old friend of her father's. Thomas had always been a beacon of wisdom and integrity, and Amelia hoped he would believe her. As she explained her discovery, his expression grew grave. "Amelia, if what you say is true, we are dealing with something far more dangerous than we can imagine. We must proceed with caution," he advised. Together, they pored over the map, identifying key locations within the castle and the city that might hold further clues. They decided to investigate the old archives in the basement of the city hall, a place where records and documents dating back to the founding of Stanlow were kept. If there were any hidden truths about the conspiracy, they would be found there. As night fell, Amelia and Thomas made their way to the city hall. The building, an imposing structure of stone and iron, loomed in the darkness. They entered through a side door, navigating the shadowy hallways until they reached the archives. The air was musty, and the only light came from their flickering lanterns. They searched through dusty tomes and brittle parchments, uncovering documents that hinted at corruption and treachery among Stanlow's founding families. Names and connections emerged, painting a picture of greed and betrayal that had been carefully hidden for decades. But one name stood out among the rest: Lydia Blacktree, Rehan's sister. Amelia's heart sank. Could Lydia have been involved in her brother's death? The thought was almost too much to bear, but the evidence was compelling. Lydia had been close to Rehan, involved in his work, and had much to gain from his demise. They found letters detailing her ambitions, her frustrations with Rehan's paranoia, and her alliance with other powerful families in Stanlow. Just as they were about to leave, they heard footsteps echoing through the hallway. Panic surged through Amelia as she and Thomas extinguished their lanterns and hid behind a large bookshelf. The footsteps grew louder, and a shadowy figure entered the room, scanning the area with a flashlight. "It's not safe here," Thomas whispered. "We need to leave." But as they tried to slip out unnoticed, the figure turned and shone the flashlight directly on them. Amelia's blood ran cold as she recognized the face. It was Gregory Wainwright, the city's chief magistrate and a close ally of Lydia Blacktree. Well, what do we have here?" Gregory sneered. "Snooping around where you don't belong, Amelia." Thomas stepped forward, trying to shield Amelia. "We know the truth, Gregory. You can't hide it forever." Gregory's expression darkened. "I think you've learned too much. It's a pity, really." Before Amelia could react, Gregory drew a pistol. The shot echoed through the room, and Thomas fell to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Amelia screamed, her heart shattering as she knelt beside her fallen friend. "You won't get away with this," she cried, her voice breaking. Gregory laughed coldly. "Oh, but I already have. And now, I'll make sure you join him." Amelia's mind raced. She had to escape, to survive long enough to expose the conspiracy. With a surge of adrenaline, she grabbed a heavy book and hurled it at Gregory, momentarily throwing him off balance. She dashed for the door, her vision blurred by tears and fear. She ran through the darkened streets of Stanlow, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The fog closed in around her, and she felt as though the city itself was conspiring against her. She knew she had to get back to the castle, to the sanctuary, where she might find some semblance of safety. But as she approached the castle gates, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Lydia Blacktree. Her expression was cold, devoid of any familial warmth. "Amelia," Lydia said softly, "you should have stayed out of this." Amelia's heart pounded. "Why, Lydia? Why did you do it?" Lydia's eyes hardened. Rehan was a genius, but he was also a madman. His paranoia would have destroyed us all. Stanlow needed stability, not his incessant fear of imaginary assassins. "You betrayed your own brother," Amelia whispered, horrified. "I did what was necessary," Lydia replied. "And now, I'll do what's necessary to protect Stanlow's future." Before Amelia could react, Gregory emerged from the shadows, his pistol aimed directly at her. Amelia backed away, her mind racing for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. "Goodbye, Amelia," Lydia said, her voice icy. The shot rang out, and Amelia felt a searing pain in her chest. She fell to the ground, the world around her fading into darkness. As she lay there, gasping for breath, she saw Rehan's ghost appear beside her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I failed to protect you." Amelia reached out, her fingers brushing through his spectral form. "The truth, it has to come out." Rehan nodded, his form flickering. "It will. Rest now, Amelia. Your fight is over." As the darkness closed in, Amelia's last thought was of Stanlow, the city she had loved and fought to protect. She hoped that somehow the truth would prevail, and that the sacrifices she and Thomas had made would not be in vain. But as the light faded from her eyes, she couldn't help but feel the weight of tragedy and loss, knowing that the ghosts of Stanlow's past would continue to haunt the city for years to come. In the stillness of the night, the fog rolled in thicker than ever, shrouding the city in an impenetrable veil. The conspirators had won this battle, but the whispers of the dead would never be silenced, and the shadows would forever be alive with the secrets of Stanlow.